Welcome to Learn with MS English. Encourage. Speak smart. Speak confident.
Welcome to today's deep dive. I am so glad you're here with us.
Yeah, really great to have you tuning in.
If you are anything like me, you probably have these days where your brain just feels incredibly heavy.
Oh, absolutely. Heavy is the perfect word for it.
Right. And not necessarily depressed, but just weighed down by the sheer relentless volume of noise and tension in the world right now.
It is a lot to process.
It really is. So today we are going on a bit of a unique mission to address that exact feeling.
We are.
We're looking at material that, on the surface, seems almost deceptively simple, but it actually contains a massive paradigm shift regarding how we process global tension.
It is a remarkable piece of media. We are analyzing a transcript today from a YouTube channel called Speak English with Class.
Which sounds like a standard language channel, right?
Right. Originally, this was designed as a language lesson to teach B2 level English conversation.
B2, so like upper intermediate.
Exactly. But when you look closely at the structure of this lesson, it goes far, far beyond vocabulary tests.
Oh, yeah.
It uses the framework of language acquisition to dissect human behavior. It maps out this profoundly insightful exploration of how to find peace in a world that seems, frankly, addicted to arguing.
Addicted is a great way to put it. But before we get into the mechanics of that, I really want to establish our baseline for this conversation.
That is very important, yes.
Because just like the material we are analyzing, this deep dive maintains a strict, absolute, neutral stance.
We are not taking political sides here.
Not at all. We are not backing a specific country. We are not endorsing any religion. And we are not taking a position on any particular global conflict.
None of that.
The lens we are using today is entirely focused on the civilian experience. It is about the ordinary humans who are invariably caught in the crossfire of life.
And that distinction is crucial for you, the listener, to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Because stripping away the flags, the political rhetoric, the historical debates, it forces us to look at the absolute baseline human requirement for safety and dignity.
It really does.
It provides a highly grounding perspective when the news cycle feels entirely unmoored.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the way this B2 English lesson transforms the massive, seemingly impossible concept of world peace into actionable daily psychological habits, that is what makes it so valuable.
It shrinks it down.
It does. Let's start with a reality that I know you, listening right now, have experienced. You open an app or you turn on the news, and within 2 minutes,
Boom.
boom. Exactly. You're hit with a wall of tension.
Everywhere you look.
People are out there arguing as if it were a competitive sport.
Like Olympic level arguing.
Olympic level.
Yeah.
Where the goal isn't to solve anything, but just to destroy the opponent.
And the cognitive load that places on an ordinary person is staggering.
I mean, think about it. You might just be sitting on your sofa at the end of a long workday.
You're just trying to unwind.
Right. And suddenly you are thrust into the middle of a high-stakes, highly emotional, global shouting match.
And our brains are not built for that. The human brain wasn't evolved to process the anger of a million strangers simultaneously.
Not at all. And that leads to a very heavy, somewhat paralyzing question, which is, what can I even do?
Yeah. When you're just one person.
When you're one person and the world feels fundamentally unstable,
Yeah.
How do you cope?
And the answer provided here in the source is a concept called a micro-peace.
Micro-peace. I love this.
It is brilliant. The idea is that when the macro world is spiraling out of control, you do not try to fix the entire planet.
Because you can't.
Exactly. You intentionally shrink your focus to what you can touch.
Shrink the focus. There's a solid psychological mechanism at play there, isn't there?
There really is. Establishing order in your microenvironment sends a subconscious signal to your brain that you are still capable.
That you have agency.
Right, and that you are still safe.
The source gives some great examples of this. One of the coping mechanisms discussed is simply cleaning a small area.
Just a small one.
Right, not overhauling your entire house.
Because that's just another overwhelming task.
Exactly. That just adds to the stress.
Yeah.
It's about organizing, say, the desk next to your laptop.
It is a physical manifestation of regaining control.
Another brilliant anecdote from the lesson is the practice of taking a 10-minute walk with absolutely no phone.
No podcasts.
No music.
No notifications.
Just spending 10 minutes looking at the sky, noticing the trees, and deliberately remembering to breathe.
Which sounds almost too simple.
It does, but the lesson frames it as an active refusal to burn inside constantly.
An active refusal. I like that.
And this really highlights a sharp contrast between the people driving global chaos and the people actually living in it.
It really does. When we look at the civilian reality, we see a stark contrast to the political reality.
How so?
Well, conflict is almost always pushed by power, right? By
Yeah.
abstract political strategy, by people sitting in highly secure rooms making decisions on a map.
Moving pieces around.
Exactly. But it is the ordinary people, the families trying to buy groceries, the students trying to study, the workers commuting, who actually pay the physical and psychological price.
They're the ones carrying the trauma in your nervous systems.
Always.
There is a moment in the lesson that really forces a perspective shift regarding that exact civilian reality. It frames a boring day not as a nuisance, but as an incredible luxury.
A luxury.
Yes. If you really think about that, the fact that you and I can complain about mundane, annoying things,
Like sitting in bad traffic.
bad traffic, or a delayed train, or rainy weather, ruining a weekend plan.
Having the space to be annoyed by that is an absolute blessing compared to the reality of navigating a conflict zone.
It entirely alters your relationship with daily inconveniences.
It does. For civilians trapped in conflict, peace is not an abstract slogan printed on a protest sign.
No.
Peace is the bedrock of basic human dignity.
It means the luxury of being able to plan your week.
Rather than operating on pure adrenaline and just trying to survive the next 12 hours.
It's the simple expectation that you can send your kids off to school in the morning and actually trust that they will come home safely in the afternoon.
Right.
When it is framed through that lens, peace isn't a passive state or a sign of weakness. It is the absolute fundamental requirement for a functioning life.
What's fascinating here is how the lesson transitions from this broad philosophical desire for peace into the actual granular mechanics of how peace is dismantled in a society.
Because it is, at its core, an English lesson.
Right. Because it is structured as a language lesson, it uses specific vocabulary words to map out the psychological progression of hate.
Almost like a disease.
Exactly like a sequential disease or an invasive plant species where you can clearly identify its stages of growth.
Let's walk through that anatomy of conflict because it starts incredibly quietly.
Very quietly.
The very first vocabulary word they teach in this progression is prejudice. But I want to pause and ask you about this because isn't pattern recognition just a natural human survival instinct?
Yes.
So at what point does normal observation cross the line into dangerous prejudice?
That is the pivotal question. Human brains do naturally categorize information to save energy. That is biological. But prejudice, in the context of this vocabulary progression, is when that categorization becomes a rigid, assumed narrative about an entire group of people.
So it's not just a passing thought.
No, it is judging someone before you have a single piece of real data about them as an individual.
Like looking at their name.
Their name, their religion, the accent they speak with, or the passport they hold, and you assign a whole set of negative assumptions based entirely on a stereotype.
So it's when you hear one negative story and you decide all people like that must be inherently the same.
Exactly.
It's essentially fear and ignorance masquerading as intuition.
That's a great way to put it. And if that prejudice isn't questioned,
You just let it sit there.
if you let it sit there in your mind as an accepted fact, it naturally escalates to the second vocabulary word, which is intolerance.
Tolerant.
Intolerance represents a significant shift from passive thought to an active boundary.
This is when that quiet internal judgment hardens into a firm refusal to accept that other people even have the right to live differently.
Or think differently. You stop simply disagreeing with an opposing viewpoint, and you start operating under the belief that their very existence or way of life is fundamentally wrong and shouldn't be permitted.
And this is where the friction really starts to build in a society.
Oh, absolutely.
Because intolerance, especially when it is constantly reinforced by media echo chambers.
Or the algorithms we interact with every single day.
Exactly. It eventually hits a boiling point. Which brings us to the third step in the progression.
Hostility.
Hostility.
Hostility is the visible manifestation of the disease. It is open anger and aggression.
And we see this dominating the landscape now.
Everywhere. You see it in the comment sections of nearly every social media platform, regardless of the topic.
It doesn't even have to be political. It could be a baking video.
Seriously.
Yeah.
You see it in political rhetoric that relies on attacking rather than debating. And you see it in cruel jokes that are designed specifically to demean a group of people.
There is a chilling psychological detail noted in the lesson about this specific stage. When hostility truly takes over, the human brain stops processing the other person as human.
The humanity is completely erased.
Completely erased, and all the brain sees is a conceptual enemy.
Just an abstract enemy.
And let's actually just sit with that for a second, because that is the exact mechanism that allows atrocities to happen.
It is.
Once you strip away someone's humanity, it becomes frighteningly easy to accept and sometimes even celebrate their pain.
It is a dark reality of human psychology, and it requires a lot of self-awareness to recognize.
I think it's important for you, listening right now, to reflect on your own digital and physical environments. Have you witnessed this exact progression?
A quiet prejudice hardening into intolerance.
Right, and that intolerance exploding into open hostility. Have you seen that in your own online spaces or in your neighborhood?
The progression is subtle.
It is remarkably easy for a community to fall into this trap without ever formally deciding to do so.
Which brings us to perhaps the most uncomfortable dimension of this entire framework.
Our own personal role in this cycle.
Yes, because the vast majority of people are not the ones starting a global conflict or writing hostile legislation.
Thankfully.
But we are very often participating in the ecosystem that sustains that hostility.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the lesson shifts its focus to how ordinary people, sitting in the total safety of their own living rooms, interact with this cycle.
How we become complicit in the vocabulary of hate.
Complicit. The framework identifies two main avenues of complicity, active and passive.
Let's start with the active part. The phrase used here is fueling the fire.
Fueling the fire.
It is a perfect idiom because it implies adding combustible material to a situation that is already burning.
And the brilliance of how this is taught is the acknowledgement that we often do this without malicious intent.
We aren't necessarily trying to be destructive.
No, we do it casually. You might share a shocking, emotionally charged video that aligns with your political views without taking 5 seconds to verify if the footage is even real.
Or if it's from the current decade.
Exactly. Or you might lie in bed at midnight, feeling tired and cranky, and post a highly aggressive, sarcastic reply to a stranger online.
We share mocking memes because we want the dopamine hit of seeing our side win the argument.
And the justification we use internally is usually something along the lines of, I am just expressing myself.
Or I am just raising awareness about an important issue.
Right.
But analytically speaking, you are not just expressing yourself, you are actively adding heat to a closed system.
Misinformation, biting sarcasm.
Treating human lives like a sporting event where your team must crush their team. All of these actions ensure the ambient hostility in society remains high.
You are maintaining the fire.
Maintaining the fire.
But what about the passive side of complicity? Because a lot of people might say, well, I don't post angry things, I just stay out of it.
The lesson uses the phrase turning a blind eye to describe this.
Turning a blind eye.
And this raises an important question. Why do fundamentally good people choose to look away when they see hostility occurring?
Why do they?
The analysis here is deeply empathetic to the human condition. It acknowledges bystander fatigue.
People are exhausted.
They are. They are afraid of getting dragged into an argument, or worse, becoming the target of the hostility themselves.
Right.
So to preserve their own immediate comfort and mental energy, they pretend they do not see the cruelty happening right in front of them.
We've all been in a situation where someone makes a prejudice joke at a family dinner, and instead of calling it out, we just stare at our plate and keep eating.
Or we see someone being bullied or harassed in a community forum.
And we just keep scrolling to the next post.
Yeah.
We see a colleague share something genuinely dangerous, and we choose to stay silent because confronting them feels socially awkward.
Or just exhausting. The problem is the systemic cost of that comfort.
Yeah.
Silence does not protect the target of the hostility. It only protects the status quo.
Wow.
And when that widespread passive silence mixes with the active hostility we discussed earlier, it creates the perfect breeding ground for the next vocabulary word in the progression.
Which is oppression.
Oppression.
Oppression is where individual hostility scales up into a systemic issue. It is the unfair, cruel treatment, usually executed by people who hold institutional power, directed against groups who cannot easily defend themselves.
Oppression systematically strips people of their voice.
Their legal rights.
And their physical safety. And again, tying it back to the core theme, the politicians might be the ones pushing the buttons.
But the ordinary civilians carry the crushing weight. of that oppression.
They lose their homes
Their livelihoods.
and their baseline sense of security. And when you have a sustained environment of oppression combined with prolonged fear and humiliation, it paves a direct road to the most extreme end of the human behavioral spectrum.
This brings us to the concepts of radicalization and extremism.
Yes.
This is the darkest destination on the vocabulary tour. I want to understand the mechanics of this better. Why is it that when someone lives with constant fear and anger for a long period of time, they become so vulnerable to radicalization?
It comes down to cognitive desperation. The human brain craves certainty, especially when it is in pain.
Sure.
Extremism thrives in environments of prolonged despair because it offers a highly seductive, incredibly simple answer to complex, nuanced suffering.
It provides a scapegoat.
Exactly. The extreme mindset says, all of your complicated problems, all of your pain is entirely because of them.
If we simply remove them, everything will instantly be fine.
It completely rejects the hard work of balance, it rejects dialogue, and it rejects the basic humanity of the perceived enemy.
It's a false promise of a quick fix.
Yes.
And as history continually proves, the world is never that simple.
Never.
Those extreme ideas might feel powerful, decisive, and momentarily comforting to a desperate mind, but they ultimately destroy any residual chance of achieving that baseline micro-peace we talked about at the beginning.
They do.
So we've tracked this heavy downward spiral, prejudice hardening into intolerance,
Exploding into hostility.
which is fueled by our actions or permitted by our silence.
Eventually institutionalizing into oppression and breeding extremism.
It is a bleak trajectory.
Very bleak.
But the lesson doesn't just leave us at the bottom of that spiral.
No, it provides a very practical roadmap backup.
Yes.
The underlying logic is highly empowering. If hate and extremism can be cultivated step by step through daily micro-interactions, then peace can be reconstructed using the exact same mechanism.
I love that. The phrase they introduced for this counteraction is to root out hate.
Root out. It's a great piece of imagery.
It implies that you can't just trim the visible leaves of the weed and expect it to die.
No, you have to dig into the dirt and pull the entire root system out so it cannot grow back.
Practically speaking, what does rooting out hate look like for an ordinary civilian who isn't a diplomat?
Well, it requires rigorously policing your own private spaces.
Okay.
It means consciously auditing your own vocabulary and actively removing dehumanizing language.
So stopping yourself before you speak.
Right. It means making the socially difficult choice to refuse to laugh at a prejudiced joke, thereby refusing to let intolerance sound normal when you are in the room.
It is the active decision that you will not share content that strips away someone else's humanity.
Regardless of how deeply you might disagree with their politics or worldview.
It is intentionally choosing to inject empathy, verified facts, and basic respect into the ecosystem, rather than adding more fire.
And all of this difficult internal work leads to the final and undoubtedly most challenging vocabulary word in the entire lesson.
Reconciliation.
Reconciliation. It is a profound and often misunderstood concept.
Also,
It is critical to differentiate it from toxic positivity. Reconciliation does not mean pretending that everything is fine.
or forcing a smile and acting like the hurt never occurred.
Exactly. It fully acknowledges that harm has been done. The conflict was real and the pain is valid.
So it's not just demanding everyone hug and get over it.
Not at all. Genuine reconciliation is the active, slow, and often very uncomfortable process of rebuilding shattered trust.
It is the conscious, repeated choice by both parties not to repeat the harm.
And a crucial takeaway here is that reconciliation doesn't only happen at a massive global treaty level.
Right.
The exact same psychological muscles are required to reconcile a bitter family argument or to repair a fractured friendship.
It starts with incredibly simple but incredibly brave statements.
Yes.
It sounds like looking at someone and saying, I am ready to listen.
Or admitting, I do not know enough about this to judge it.
Or the ultimate de-escalation. I fundamentally disagree with you, but I will not attack you.
That is what peace in daily life actually sounds like.
It is the active choice to say, I see you as a human being, even when every algorithm and social pressure is demanding that you view them as the enemy.
Taking that stance requires immense emotional discipline.
It really does.
In a digital economy that literally profits off of your outrage and your hostility, choosing de-escalation is an act of quiet, powerful rebellion.
So what does this all mean? When we synthesize this entire framework, the core insight is that peace is not just a giant abstract slogan reserved for politicians signing papers in secure rooms.
No.
Peace is emotional strength. It is a cognitive muscle that you have to exercise deliberately every single day.
Through daily habits.
Exactly. It is built through the tiny, microscopic decisions you make. It is the prejudice joke you actively refuse to repeat.
It is the angry late-night post you delete before hitting send.
It is the kind, gentle comment you choose to leave for a stranger who is clearly struggling online.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, every single time you choose to practice that micropiece, you are doing something profound.
You really are.
Even if you were sitting thousands of miles away from a physical conflict zone, by refusing to engage in the vocabulary of hate, you are spiritually and culturally protecting civilians everywhere.
You are casting a tangible vote for humanity.
You are quietly but firmly affirming that human safety, human dignity, and human futures actually matter more than winning a temporary argument.
It really comes down to a commitment to not adding to the darkness. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today as you go back to your life, your commute, and your screens.
That's an important one.
We've spent this time analyzing how conflict and peace are essentially vocabularies that we learn, practice, and become fluent in. So, what words are currently dominating your own internal dictionary?
That's a great question.
If someone were to analyze the literal transcript of your daily interactions, both online and offline, the things you say and the things you type, what language would they conclude you are fluent in? Are you practicing the language of hostility, or are you mastering the language of micropeace?
It is a challenging audit to perform on yourself, but it is precisely how the trajectory of a society changes.
What would happen to our society if we started treating conflict de-escalation and micropeace as fundamental life skills taught in schools, right alongside reading and math?
That would change everything.
It really would. Something to think about the next time you feel the urge to jump into an Olympic-level argument online, or the next time you have the opportunity to just take a 10-minute walk and look at the sky.
Just look at this guy.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take care of your mind, be protective of the dictionary you choose to use, and take care of each other out there.